Mentioned it earlier, a celebrity boycott of Instagram and Facebook gaining steam yesterday. Public figures including Leonardo DiCaprio, Ashton Kutcher, Kim Kardashian West, who has more than 100 million followers on Instagram. The one-day boycott was urged by the Stop Hate for Profit campaign, whose coalition members include the NAACP, the Anti-Defamation League, the same group that organized this summer's advertising boycott of Facebook. Joining us now is Jonathan Greenblatt, CEO and National Director of the ADL. Jonathan, it's good to see you. I find myself saying this more and more, that we have a kind of an episodic show. This is not a standalone interview. We've been talking about this exact issue with you for a long time, and I keep thinking that you're going to come on and say that Facebook is doing a better job, but you never say that, do you?
Well, Joe, look, it's nice to see you again. I sort of wish we weren't still having this conversation, to be frank. But the question isn't whether they're doing a better job. The question is whether they are doing enough. And unfortunately, Stop Hate for Profit launched this action because still, indeed, months after we first talked, after more than 1,100 of the largest brands in the world said Facebook needed to do more about dealing with hate and violence on their platform, I'm back here this morning because they're simply still not doing enough.
Because, and we always have the same discussion, and it's the obvious one, Jonathan, and that is that one person's subjective analysis of what they consider completely objectionable might be different than somebody else's. And you know, when we talk about things, well, like in the workplace, you don't ever want to do or say anything that someone's grandmother might, might find offensive. And that raises the bar high enough to where, but just let me finish. With you, I'm worried that this could lead us eventually to a place where we talk about things like microaggression or things that I see happening on college campuses, where you don't see any acceptance of any opposing viewpoint whatsoever, to the exclusion of speakers, and where all of us have probably rolled our eyes at some point. I don't know, maybe you haven't, about what we're seeing on college campuses in terms of what can be offensive. And that's what the stuff you always talk about is absolutely got to be gone. But how do you make sure that you're not, just insulating me from things that I want to see?
Look, Joe, we undertook this action this week not because of a free speech issue per se. This is about, honestly, life and death. Let me give you an example. What really prompted this action were what we saw happen in Kenosha, Wisconsin just a few weeks ago. Following the shooting of Jacob Blake, we had armed militia groups who organized in the streets, and then that led to the shooting and death of two people when a 17-year-old armed with a semi-automatic weapon showed up. Now, the question is, what does Facebook have to do with it? Well, Facebook groups, one of the most popular products on the platform, has literally become the organizing tool for the armed militia movement in the United States. And I'm someone who deeply believes in free speech, but I'm sorry, the freedom of expression isn't the freedom to incite violence. And when Facebook groups are being used out in the open to organize people to bring armed weapons, when Facebook groups are being used by those who want to promote violent insurrection, Joe, I don't think that's a question of free speech. I think that's a question of what kind of society do we want? Now, look, we undertook this action to call attention to the fact that Facebook still hasn't done enough to deal with white supremacy, violent militia groups, and hate on the platform. What I'm amazed at, in literally just 2 days, the message we put out there to the world has been picked up and amplified, not just by ordinary people, not just by civil rights groups, but by some of the most prominent public figures in society. Katy Perry, Kim Kardashian, Sacha Baron Cohen. Sacha Baron Cohen, whose speech last year at ADL really catalyzed this movement in many ways. When people like Leonardo DiCaprio and Orlando Bloom and so many others are saying enough, why is that significant, Joe? These are people whose careers predicate on social media, who've built businesses and brands on this amazing platform. And when they are saying today we are going to freeze our Instagram accounts, and when they are telling the world that they have had enough of Facebook's failure to solve the problem, I think we all should sit up and take notice. It's been just over 48 hours, and literally the message has been shared over 1 billion times. Something is going on here. Right. Civil rights groups, child advocacy organizations, and now the biggest influencers in the world are all saying enough.
All right. Hey, I understand what you're saying, John, and you're saying that it would go both ways, too. Antifa, anything advocating violence would be something that you wouldn't want. But I did kind of smile a little bit. I'm not sure I want celebrities controlling all aspects of my life with some of the stuff I hear them say. Anyway, Andrew has a question.
No, Jonathan, I think the real question I was going to ask is, some people look at the celebrities that are engaged in this campaign with you as taking themselves off the platform for 24 hours and say, how much of a protest really is that? And how much of that is going to really influence Facebook? If the Kardashians decide to leave Instagram for 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, that might move a needle in a very meaningful way. The question is whether you think this 24-hour protest, ultimately, when you have a protest, you're trying to, I don't want to say hurt the other side, but you're trying to impact the other side. And the question is whether 24 hours unto itself will do that.
Look, I think we've kindled a public conversation here, Andrew, the likes of which, again, follows up what we did earlier this summer. The goal is not to bankrupt Facebook. The goal is to create a conversation about the fact that they need to stop the flow of disinformation heading into this election. They need to not allow violence on the platform. And indeed, it's just one day. But I told you over the summer, Andrew, that was the warning shot. This is yet another salvo, and there will be more to come until Facebook takes the action.